On this Monday night, the prestigious honor for a pair of pioneers. The Nobel Prize awarded to two scientists behind COVID-19 vaccines.
We collaborated and had fun.
How their perseverance paved the way for scientific achievement. Shameful secrets.
How did we let the Nazis into this country?
The calls to declassify documents on suspected Nazis in Canada. Donald Trump back on trial.
They're wasting everybody's time.
The latest lawsuit and courtroom drama, and what the Republican frontrunner stands to lose. Plus, there's no place like home.
I have to pinch myself.
Realizing the dream of home ownership on a BC First Nation.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine was announced today, awarded to two doctors whose groundbreaking work helped change the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Their decades of research paved the way for the COVID mRNA vaccines. The pair will now share $1 million US in prize money, but for a long time they struggled to get any grants, and one of them was even demoted. Our Europe Bureau Chief, Goomansingh, has the incredible story behind the science.
If you got an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, you're linked to the latest Nobel Prize recipients for physiology or medicine.
You can't have a better example of how something became useful for the whole world and for humanity.
After years of working solo, Katalin Karikó teamed up with Drew Weissman, and together in 2005 they developed what's known as the nucleoside base modifications, a way to prevent the body's immune system from attacking lab-made mRNA. Technology that Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna went on to use when they made their mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. The duo now has multiple awards, but Karikó's journey has been one of persistence. The Hungarian scientist revealed her late mother would listen to the Nobel announcements on the radio, believing her daughter could win. She said this when I had no professor job or no team. I was only working hard in the laboratory. A fact that makes the work all the more impressive, says this Canadian infectious disease expert.
She did not get tenure. She did not win big grants. She had her papers rejected from journals of the highest caliber, and she persisted.
Today, the University of Pennsylvania noted the brilliant researchers who represent the epitome of scientific inspiration and determination.
Katie lit the match, and we spent the rest of, 20 plus years working together, figuring out how to get it to work, how to get a vaccine to function well.
Dr. Isaac Bogosh says scientists all over the world struggle to secure funding, and ultimately, human health suffers.
This is a giant wake-up call that it is so important to fund good science and good scientists.
Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
The federal government is facing growing calls to reveal secret details about suspected Nazi collaborators who were allowed to enter Canada after the Second World War. Those calls come after Parliament paid tribute to Yaroslav Hunka last month, even though he fought for the Nazis. Jewish leaders say what started as an international embarrassment could become an opportunity to confront a shameful part of Canada's past. David Akin reports on the push to declassify the Deschênes report.
On behalf of all of us in this House, I would like to present unreserved apologies for what took place on Friday.
To many, the Prime Minister's apology should be the start of a renewed reckoning of Canada's history of accepting former Nazis into the country.
How we could possibly have such indifference for Nazi perpetrators who came to this country and there were no prosecutions and no deportations.
The federal government has only once tried to answer that question, in the 1980s, after allegations were raised that Canada had become a haven for Nazi war criminals. The Mulroney government convened an inquiry headed by a Quebec judge named Jules Deschênes. The resulting Deschênes report did find evidence that no Nazis had been admitted to Canada, and new legislation was passed to enable their prosecution or deportation. But part of the Deschênes report, a part which contains allegations about specific individuals, has never been made public.
Get the records open and tell Canadians what really happened. How did we let the Nazis into this country? And we are just not going to move beyond this scandal until that chapter is opened.
Researchers believe Canada admitted as many as 2,000 individuals who fought or worked for the Nazis. Jewish organizations say releasing all of the Deschênes report is crucial for a full accounting.
There's an opportunity here for the government to open up the books and let's once and for all bring this chapter to a close by at least being transparent, at least sharing the information.
Asked to release all of the Deschênes report, government ministers so far have been non-committal.
As a government, we're going to be very thoughtful about any further steps that need to be taken.
A committee of MPs is expected to study the issue when Parliament resumes next week. David Akin, Global News.
European Union foreign ministers are in Kyiv for their first ever meeting outside the borders of the 27-member bloc. They paid tribute to fallen Ukrainian soldiers and pledged to continue their support for Ukraine. That meeting comes amid concerns about growing funding fatigue from some of Ukraine's allies. Over the weekend, U.S. lawmakers stripped funding for Ukraine from their short-term budget deal. And as Redmond Shannon reports, some NATO members have also announced plans to end military aid altogether.
Awkward and icy. Slovak President Zuzana Čaputová invites former Prime Minister Robert Fico to form a government after Saturday's election, even as she is suing him for calling her a US agent. Allegations, she says, resulted in death threats against her. Since topping the polls, Fico has repeated his promise to end all military aid to Ukraine if he can form a coalition.
He was trying to get also those voters who, for whatever reason, have favorable attitudes towards Russia, particularly because of past.
Former Slovak Foreign Minister Pavel Demeš says Fico will likely be forced to compromise on Ukraine when courting coalition partners.
If you look at composition of our parliament, which will comprise of 7 political parties, Slovakia is far from being future Hungary.
Hungary's Viktor Orban has not sent any military aid to Ukraine, and Poland, soon to go to the polls too, is threatening to stop over a grain dispute with Kyiv. But in the Ukrainian capital Monday, fewer signs of European division. EU foreign ministers symbolically meeting outside EU borders for the very first time. The bloc proposing billions more in aid and a plan to transfer frozen Russian assets to Ukraine, aiming too to shore up a united message on Russian aggression.
For us, Europeans, allow me to repeat it, it's an existential threat.
It's not just Europe where cracks are appearing. Washington's short-term budget deal on Saturday did not include Ukraine funds.
We are now working with both sides of the Congress to make sure that it does not repeat again.
The Kremlin said Monday it expects US aid to Ukraine to continue, but it also expects fatigue to eventually set in. The results of the next US election could determine whether that's true in Washington and the wider West. Jeff?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Red.
No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law.
The civil fraud case against former U.S. President Donald Trump, brought forward by New York's Attorney General Letitia James, got underway in a Manhattan courtroom today. Trump is accused of generating more than $1 billion by lying about his real estate empire. On his way into court, Trump insulted New York's Attorney General, the judge, and called the trial itself a sham. But the case could have serious implications for him and his real estate businesses. Joel Senek reports from Washington.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump defiant outside a New York City courtroom Monday.
It's a disgraceful trial put forward by an attorney general who's corrupt.
Trump appearing in person for the first day of a civil case that could see him lose large parts of his real estate empire.
We're wasting our time on this trial with a Democrat judge from the clubhouses. It's a disgrace.
The former president, his two eldest sons, and the Trump Organization are accused of deceiving banks and insurers by inflating assets and misrepresenting the size of properties. The New York Attorney General is seeking at least $250 million in fines and sat front row in court on Monday.
Donald Trump and the other defendants have committed persistent and repeated fraud. The law is both powerful and fragile, and today in court we will prove our case.
The judge hearing this case has already ruled Trump committed fraud in his business dealings. This next phase will largely decide financial penalties. One legal expert says this voluntary in-person appearance could make a difference in the final ruling.
If the person has shown up in your court, that's telling you that they are paying attention. That could lead to greater leniency.
The former U.S. president is facing several legal battles right now. He's been indicted 4 times since March in 4 different jurisdictions. Now, Trump does not face any criminal penalties in this New York case, as it is a civil one. He is expected to testify, but not for weeks. The judge says this trial could run into December. Jeff?
Joel Senek in Washington. Thanks, Joel. Manitoba party leaders are making their final pitches to voters ahead of tomorrow's provincial election. That race has seen record turnout at advanced polls. More than 200,000 votes have already been cast. As Rosanna Hempel reports, the outcome is sure to make history.
How do you do? I'm Wab Canoe, and I'm running to be our premier so we can fix healthcare in Manitoba.
We will continue to provide Manitoba with stability, thanks to our experienced PC team.
Incumbent Premier Heather Stefanson's been in power since 2021, and her progressive Conservatives have held a majority in the province's legislature since 2016. With the latest opinion polling favoring Wab Canoe and the New Democrats, that blue tide could turn orange.
I think we can all be pretty confident that the NDP is in the lead. How much that lead is, how much it holds, how much voters, might surprise us on Election Day.
Mary Agnes Welch with Probe Research says the PC's early campaign focus on affordability is now being overshadowed by wedge issues in the last 2 weeks, from parental rights to the call to search a landfill for the remains of 2 murdered Indigenous women.
Those are some risky risks to take in a campaign, and I don't know that they're going to pay off.
Stefanson campaigning Monday, focusing on her party's experience.
Tomorrow, Manitobans, the decision is up to you. An NDP who disregards the law, raises taxes, puts Manitoba in debt, and has no experience, or an experienced PC team who will make your life more affordable, make streets safer, heal our healthcare system, and make our communities stronger.
Canoe, who's been urging Liberal supporters to cast a ballot for the NDP instead, isn't straying from his focus on healthcare.
If elected tomorrow, the Manitoba NDP will take immediate action to reduce emergency room wait times in our province by adding beds at the hospitals with the remaining ERs.
But Manitoba Liberal leader Douglas Lamont saying his party is the only one that can stop both.
You can make sure that there's a minority government, and you are free to make it happen by voting Manitoba Liberal.
There are historic storylines in this election, whether Manitoba stays blue or swings orange. If Stefanson wins, she will be the first woman to be elected premier by Manitobans. If Canoe wins, he will become the first First Nations premier of a Canadian province. Manitobans head to the polls on Tuesday. Rosanna Hempel, Global News, Winnipeg.
In a surprise move, military prosecutors have withdrawn their case against Lieutenant General Stephen Whelan. He had been accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate and improperly changing her performance evaluation back in 2011. In court, Whelan wiped away tears as the final charge was dropped. In 2021, he was removed as head of military personnel. Whelan's lawyers say he now plans to take legal action against the government for destroying his career. Catastrophe strikes Sunday Mass. Coming up, a roof caves in on a church full of worshipers. Plus, the world's greatest gymnast makes history again. A security camera captured the moment a church roof collapsed in northern Mexico on Sunday, killing at least 10 people and injuring dozens more, including a baby and young children. Rescuers worked through the night, searching for another 30 people believed to be trapped in the rubble. It happened during a community mass for a baptism ceremony. It's not known yet what caused that collapse. American gymnast Simone Biles is once again making history, becoming the first woman to land the Yurchenko double pike vault. Wow, the 19-time world champion nailed the landing at the Artistic Gymnastic Championships, and that skill will now be named the Biles 2 in her honor. This is her first international competition after a 2-year absence. She pulled out of several events at the Tokyo Olympics, citing difficulties with what's known as the twisties, a spatial disorientation condition common in gymnastics. Economic reconciliation. Still ahead, Indigenous business owners call for more capital. Welcome back. Many Canadian businesses have struggled to survive following pandemic restrictions and closures, and Indigenous business owners say those challenges are amplified by systemic and economic barriers. Indigenous entrepreneurs are now pushing to improve access to capital for communities and startups. Nivrita Ganguly reports on the push for economic reconciliation.
Raven Indigenous Capital Partners is working to support Indigenous businesses often excluded from the Western economy.
We founded the firm in 2018, and it was really in response to the lack of access to patient, flexible capital by Indigenous entrepreneurs across Canada and the United States.
In 5 years, Paul Lassert's fund has grown to $190 million, investing primarily in Indigenous businesses.
We've designed an entirely Indigenous approach where we look at Indigenous job creation, Indigenous governance, Indigenous ownership.
The owner of one company in their portfolio says his investors' values matter.
We needed an investor who believed in the same thing as us. It felt good to be able to work with people who really work hard to get money into Indigenous businesses.
Located on BC's Sunshine Coast, Aaron Joe's waste management company has expanded in recent years. He says getting started 14 years ago wasn't easy.
For us, we started this business on reserve, and we rolled up our sleeves and ran off a shoestring budget.
Indigenous business leaders say the challenges facing many business owners are systemic.
Indigenous people have had barriers placed in front of them legislatively, systemically, in society that didn't enable us to participate.
Because we were on reserve, that we couldn't leverage our land.
Annual federal funding for Indigenous priorities has increased more than 150% in the past 8 years. But First Nation leader Charlene Gale says a lot more needs to be done.
Far too long we've just been left behind, and I think that having the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program will achieve that fairness and our ability to be involved meaningfully.
A federal loan guarantee program that deploys funds to more sectors and greater private investment could go a long way towards supporting Indigenous businesses.
Very happy to see the amount of healing that happens when there is a flow of capital. The future of the Canadian economy is that it's an Indigenous economy.
Nivrita Ganguly, Global News, Toronto.
Home sweet home. Next, how one Indigenous community is taking back power over how they live. Canada's housing crisis is being felt across the country, including in many Indigenous communities. In northern BC, members of a First Nation are reflecting on a unique piece of legislation. It allows them to individually own their own homes. Neethu Garcha spoke with some Nisga'a Nation residents about the push to own property.
Where is your home?
Behind the store over there.
This is where 70-year-old Eric Grandison lives. In most Indigenous communities, the concept of home ownership doesn't exist. But here in Nisga'a Nation, things are different because of a treaty signed more than 20 years ago. They were the first band in BC to sign a modern treaty, and Grandison says for him, it still feels surreal.
I have to pinch myself every time I go home because I can't believe that I actually own real estate. I thought that I would die under the Indian Act. It was that pervasive.
Under that act, all land on reserves is owned by the Crown. Nisga'a is no longer under the act, and local leaders say it's helped people take back power over how they live.
Our residents own their property, both the house and the ground that it sits on, through the Land Holdings Act.
That legislation passed nearly 14 years ago, but the idea of privatizing these properties has been cause for concern. Critics have said it puts communities at risk of losing more of their lands if sold to non-Indigenous buyers or seized by a bank when a mortgage isn't repaid. Local leaders say it's been a risk worth taking.
As far as I'm aware, there have not been any mortgages that have been given back. They've been
Nobody's defaulted.
Nobody has defaulted.
But there's a severe shortage of adequate housing in Indigenous communities across Canada. The estimated cost to address the crisis in First Nations alone is $135 billion. The Assembly of First Nations is working to develop a national strategy with the federal government.
We have to, as First Nations, we have to learn how to fend for ourselves. The odds are overwhelmingly stacked against you.
For Grandison, a day school survivor, he's taking a moment to reflect on the progress people in his community have made, even through so much pain.
And now we're here. We've come a long ways. I'm very proud of what First Nations are doing today.
Neetu Garcha, Global News, Nisga'a Nation.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Triple Peak Mountain. That's near Port Alberni, British Columbia. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Have a great night.